curiosity over fear. That's probably what gets me in trouble sometimes.
Curiosity over fear.
Being curious and doing something, and then I should have been fearful about it and not done it.
But if was it like you got in trouble because someone else didn't like you being curious, or because what you learned?
Both.
Oh. Do you have one of those moments?
No, I can't think of one, but
it's just a
in
feeling.
general.
It's just a feeling.
Yeah.
What is your backstory?
Okay, so I grew up on a farm in Lanark, Illinois. In fact, it's the second farm that my parents rented so that they could make it. They were very young. They sang together a little bit before they got married. They sang at a wedding together. Dad loved music. Dad loved life. Mom loved to be near Dad because Dad really loved life. And Mom, I think the way she grew up on a farm, she was the oldest, and I think she felt that she was forced to do chores and such. So her makeup was sort of, she just wanted to be where the action was, and the action was with my dad. And they grew up in high school. He was 2 years older than she. And they got married. They were only Dad was 21, I think. Mom was barely 18. And I came pretty soon after that, 9 months, I think. And,
I think there's a minimum 9 months.
Definitely. And so they got married and had me, and then had my sister, Connie, 16 months later. And I remember we'd go in the car, driving, and Mom and Dad would sing together in the car. And those are my first experiences where I learned to love music. It's because Mom and Dad would sing, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." And Dad would harmonize with Mom. And then I would say to Dad, I must have been about 6 or 7, "How do you do that, Dad? How do you sing like that and make it sound nice?" And he says, "Well, I just harmonize. Here, I'll teach you how to do it." So he's driving, then he's teaching me the harmony. And then Mom sings the melody, and then I was able to do the harmony. And then Dad, since he heard me doing the harmony, well, my sister, she would do the melody with Mom. And Mom would have to put her hands over her ears because the harmony would totally throw her off. So, but Mom had a lovely voice, beautiful voice, and then Dad would sing a third part. So then eventually got used to them doing one-on-one, to harmony, and then I learned to do the third part also.
Was there any cool stories from the Army band that kind of helped you develop as an individual?
I think I learned to be even more positive than I was then about everyone, because you're a better person, you're a better leader, and you are judged upon your leadership abilities and your talents and such.
Are you judged by both the people above you and the people that you have to, the people above you, the people you're working with at your level, and the ones below you?
Someone at your level usually writes your write-up about how you're successful you've been every year or every 6 months, something like that. And so you're judged all the time. So that was probably a pretty good thing. I had to look back on myself and get outside of myself and look at myself objectively to how I was progressing or not progressing. And if I made stupid mistakes, that was why.
Is there anything that you've learned through having 3 husbands that helped you learn about your inner peace, just being happier with yourself?
Growing up on the farm, this goes back to growing up on the farm in Lanark, Illinois, always vying for attention. So there was always this feeling of, am I good enough, or how can I get attention? So I used my music, I believe, to help me feel loved. And I think when I made my choice of husband, I was put in a situation where I needed to pick safety over myself feeling of who I was really in love with. And then I thought, well, I'll love him and I'll do my very best. And then things just didn't work out that way for reasons. But then being married to him, and then 2 years later, after we were divorced after 16 years, I was married to Ralph for 25 years. And he helped me learn to love myself because he was very stable and a very kind person. And then he passed away. And then I was married to Ron Goodbread. I've learned to love myself and not always try to make other people happy. Hopefully at not their expense.
Is there anything from all three personalities as you progress, that you realize there's certain things that you like and certain things that you don't like from men or maybe people in general?
If they're happy about themselves, then it's easier for you to be happy about yourself in your relationship. And I found that more so in Ralph. Was a very accomplished, wonderful, loving person. Tragically, his wife was killed in an automobile accident 2 years before we got married. He had 5 grown children. He was 15 years older than I. We'd worked together in the church. He was in the stake presidency, and I was the stake music chairman. But he just was very kind and very warm. And then in my first marriage, I had 2 sons. And my second marriage, then Ralph and I had a son, Ronnie. So I've had 3 sons. And then with Judge Goodbread, Ronald Goodbread, he was a whole new, different story. In a way, he was having some challenges in life, and I think I came along at the right time in his life to help him a lot. Because he was going down physically. He didn't realize that until we were together for a while. But we've all learned from each other. I know that Vic and I both learned from each other. And if one can't handle the situation, you just can't stay in it if you know you're going down and down and down. And I knew I was.
Do you know or when you started realizing you didn't want to be with him?
Probably within the first year of marriage.
Is there any signs, anything that, like if I had a wife or something and I realized that this wasn't going well, is there anything that you looked at and you said that this was
I had seen some examples of great frustration in his life, and he took it out on one of my children. And it just turned me and scared me, but yet I didn't have anywhere to go. I knew that my parents were, you're in your own situation, and they're still trying to make their situation good. So I couldn't draw or depend on going and asking help, because, it would have, in other words, I just stayed in it, and I thought, I'll try harder to make it better. But it really wasn't all me.
You realize that when people take their own pains and their own frustrations and put it on other people, rather than realize that that's just something you have to let go, those kind of people just have their own problems. You just have to let go of those relationships.
Yes, I've found out there were certain things that he was unhappy with, and I would try to help him with. And he couldn't go with any suggestion, or he had to work it out himself, and he's still working it out himself right now, I think.
So there's just those people that are not open to change. They're happy with who they are, and they're just
I don't know
stubborn.
if he's happy with who he is. That's just the way he was raised. So the way we are raised when we come into this earth and our children affects us the rest of our lives.
I know there is one saying where it's you can like whatever happens in the past, you can either let that affect you or you can move on from that. And so some people just they never move on.
Right, they're not able to. Maybe I think of some women who are in abusive relationships. They keep thinking that it's their fault, whereas it takes a lot of courage to leave.
Is that more of like a woman mindset, or just?
It could be either way. I've heard where some women beat up on their husbands. That's not very good. Not a positive situation. If you can find someone in your life, like you, when you get married, find someone who is loving and kind and who makes you feel good about yourself and who you feel you're inspired by, and you can't go wrong.
Yeah, so it's someone that you can provide value to and they can provide value to you. But you also have to be open to the fact, everyone has to be open to the fact that where I am right now isn't perfect. And then I'll be a better person tomorrow.
Right. I don't think any of us are in the place where we think we're perfect, right? Otherwise, we're not humble. We can't grow. So no matter how high even like President Carter, who just passed away, his greater attributes was helping others. And he never stopped. That was always impressive about him. As he continued after his presidency, I don't think he was a born politician. But that's being a negative. But he was a very kind man and helped so many people.
A lot of people who have that inherent kindness, but when other people start talking about them, sometimes it comes off as they're not as kind, or there's like an ulterior motive to it, that they're kind, but they want something back for it.
That reminds me of a story. I had a good friend when I was living in Dixon, Illinois, and we were in the same, she had joined the church, just joined the church, and we were in the same church organization, the same ward. It was in Sterling, Illinois. And she said, she heard somebody say something bad about me. And she said to me, Kay, she says, so-and-so said something negative about you. You need to go and do something nice for her. You need to help her realize who you really are. And that always impressed me. Because in my past, I thought, well, she's not very nice to me, or she said something bad about me, so I'm going to say something bad about her. That's not the way to go. Which to me, is right now basically the Republicans and the Democrats. They want to pull each other down, some of them, not all of them. Many of them want to work together. But just like friendships, if someone puts you down, there's some reason that they're not happy with you. And it makes you want to go to them and say, did I do something to offend you? Is there something that I can do to help you? And if I did, I'm sorry. And if they don't give you much of an answer, it's because they're not quite sure. They just got a bad vibe. Or maybe the chemistry's not quite right between these two people.
Yeah, so you don't want to be a mirror, a reflection of other people. You want to be a reflection of yourself and then show that to other people.
But also be sensitive to what's going on in the situation, so that if you need to be a dominant person in the moment, there's your opportunity to shine and help to make them feel good about themselves.
I think it was Benjamin Franklin when the Declaration of Independence was being signed. He was saying that all 13 clocks have to strike at the same time. So all 13 colonies have to all strike midnight at the same time, because if one of the clocks are off, then the entire thing will fail.
I don't remember that part, but I remember after they passed the Constitution, he said something like, well, we passed it, now we'll be fortunate if we can keep it. Something to that effect.
When you're talking about friendships and talking about relationships and people not being on the same wavelength or to have the same chemistry, it's kind of like if two clocks striking at the same time, it's kind of hard to get both people to be even within the same hour.
So you mean by clocks striking at the same time, meaning?
As in like whenever I talk to people, some people will be thinking about something else. They'll be on, like their mind will be somewhere else, and I'll try to have a conversation with them, but they're just not in the moment because everyone has their own little things that they're going through. Not that they're bad people, but rather it's just your wavelength is on one and their wavelength is on another, but it's not crossing.
And it's about the same topic, but they're just not agreeing?
Or it could be they're just distracted.
Or something's going on in their life that's bothering them, and so they can't focus on what they're there for.
But then like the next day they'll be back to their normal self.
That's life, isn't it? Sometimes they'll apologize because they realize they came on in the wrong light to you, and that's not really what they are. And they apologize, and that's good. Or if they don't apologize, then my part is to be empathetic that this person must be going through something very difficult at this time. Be kind, be understanding. Think of something to help them see a different light, a better light, or some light.
The worst part I have is whenever I'm in something, I have like brain fog or something, and I'm trying to solve something that, like the last 3 months, I didn't know how to organize the podcast in terms of categorizing it, like having an interview or having a conversation or some other stuff. And then I talked to one guy, and now like everything seems so much clearer. But the only thing is that I also know that there's been so many times where I haven't noticed someone's trying to be nice to me, and then I kind of either dismiss it or I'm not really like into the conversation, and I don't know when to apologize because I don't remember that happening. But they do, because it was something that they found more value than I did.
I found out when I'm in that type of a situation, if I offended them and I didn't know what I did or whatever, I'll take them something, like a neighbor here. Maybe I'll take them some food over and say, I just thought you might like this.
Is there also like a time when it's just you have to let it go?
People are different. People have a level that they can handle. Some can handle a lot. Some can't handle much. And it goes back to the way they are raised or the experiences that they have. So it's up to us to try to understand and be kind. And if there's something that we can do to help, then that's our opportunity.
Yeah. So it's like putting a filter. That sometimes you might hit someone else's, like your baseline would be someone else's extreme. Where like you have, like for me, I wake up and I start getting stuff done. Some other people might see that as like something like, well, no, I need to take 30 minutes to wake up and process everything. And
habit.
Yeah.
I would say that's habit.
yeah,
If they want to do that, that's fine. Everybody has their own way of doing things. But when I was in the Army, we had a run. We had to be at the band building at 6 a.m. Of course, I had to, and that's early morning traffic. So I had to get up at 4:30 to be able to get, I just tell myself, do these things, do the right things, and it will get you further on, Don't complain, you just do it.
Is there anything in the Army that kind of always, that gave you that mindset to keep pushing and not to just like stagnate and slow down and be lazy?
Everybody has a security clearance. And if you do anything stupid, or you did something stupid before you even joined the band, it's found out. And if you can't get your security clearance, you can't re-enlist. So your career is shortened. So it was an opportunity to always do your very best.
Is there a good balance between giving stuff to help people and then not giving them so much that they start to rely on you and depend on you for certain things?
There's a good balance there. You don't want to enable someone to rely on you so much that you're expected to give to them. Give to them in ways where they can support themselves and learn to fly, so to speak, do well in their careers, and help others. Be an example if you can.
So it's like you give them wings, but you also teach them how to fly with those wings.
And that's what you do with your children.
Yeah.
Right? You try to give them love more than everything, but not at the expense of them learning discipline, self-discipline, and making good choices and bad choices.
I mean, like, what's the progression from when you went as private third class to, or E3?
Private first class.
E3
I was a private first class. That's an E3. Otherwise, you're a private 1 or 2, and then private first class is E3. Then when I got to the band, I was immediately made a specialist 4, because that's what the ranks were for the Army band people. And then a couple years later, then they made the rule that everybody who enters the band starts out as a spec 6. I mean, as a sergeant, as an E6, which is really good.
Why did they choose?
Because the quality of the musicians is very high. Most of the musicians have their degrees, and advanced degrees in the Army band. Some have, so then within the Army band, then you get promoted depending on your performance as a musician and as a person and as a leader.
So it wasn't too hard to go from E6 to E8?
It took me 20 years to go from E6 to E8.
Okay, so that wasn't that long.
Right, so I was an E8, a master sergeant for 6 years, because I retired at 26 years. You can retire at 20, but in those days, if you became 55, you're automatically retired. Now, 9/11 happened about 3 months after I retired. So, which was just fine. They changed the rules so that you didn't have to retire until you're 60 years old, 60. But I was already 55, and I was singing love duets with boys that were younger than my sons. So I figured it's probably time that I should probably retire. I was ready to do something different. And during my time in the Army, I had also been a music teacher at home. I always taught private lessons in the afternoons. I loved doing that. And it was a wonderful way to get to know people in your community and to give kids opportunities to get up and perform by having recitals. And by joining some of the other organizations like the Prince George's Music Teachers Association, you get to know other teachers and have a good rapport with them and help each other with students in situations.
Was there any like criticism that you got as you were progressing through the Army that have stuck with you and you always remember that moment?
I think it was difficult when I became married to Ralph and then I had my son Ronnie. I was in a leadership position and I wasn't able to follow through very well. And I was taken down kept from continuing in that leadership position. There was a girl of another race that said to my uppers that I had said something that put her down, which was not true. It was totally in fact, the person that I was speaking to in the locker room, see, this girl overheard it, was the reason that I was taken down. But in the long run, it worked fine. Then I had more time for myself. I looked at it in a positive way, in other words. But I went to this person's house right after this happened, and I apologized to her. I said, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that you felt this way, or that what I said was interpreted in such a way. So there was no bad feeling on my part. Yet I've not had the opportunity to seek her out. I've not taken the opportunity to seek her out because it's in the past, and I don't hold any grudges. But you have the memories. Yeah. They always say never hold a grudge of hate because it'll tear you down. And that's true. You don't want to let that take up your mind. But you want to remember what you learned from the experience so that it's a positive thing and not a negative thing. And if it makes you feel bad to be around and you've done everything you can to help the situation, it's best to spend your time with others that you can help and be with.
You're forgiving yourself for that time, but you're not forgetting that it happened.
Correct. Isn't that what we should do in life, is forgive ourselves for our mistakes, but we have to make sure that we fix the situation or make reparations to the person that we may have offended. That is utmost. And hopefully they're humble and accept your being sorry about something. Now, if that person is not, then you feel sorry for them.
There's going to be some people in life that just happen to either be in a weird position or they don't forgive the past, and then you happen to just be yourself, and they take offense to that, and now they've ruined part of what you could have been. I mean, not in a bad way, but it happens.
Or someone has an already opinion of you, which may not be true.
It's an opinion based on their previous experiences with people
of what someone said to them about you, which is not true, which can happen so easily. So for you have to prove that this is not true, even if you don't know what's going on in their mind. But if you can sense the feeling of negativity, just like when I was going to church, this person had said something against me at church in Sterling, Illinois, how I went out of my way to try to mend things, and it worked. That person turned into one of my best friends.
There's something that they can improve on.
Hopefully we have the same goals, right? When my sister and I would going to church, you learn about the 10 Commandments. Mom and Dad didn't teach 10 Commandments at home, we knew you better not steal something, but there was not many opportunities to steal at home, You learn these other things when you go to school and are with people that you don't know as well. Then you learn how to treat people and how not to treat people. You learn it at home, you learn it from Grandma and Grandpa. I had a wonderful grandmother, Swedish grandmother. Her parents had come from Sweden in the early 1900s. But when Mom wasn't available to be around or whatever, I stayed at Grandma's house. And I look back in my life, if it wasn't for Grandma, at certain times, I don't know if I'd be the same person I am today, because she helped me learn to love myself. And she was just a kind lady.
I think I remember that one story you told about how you were at your grandmother's house and...
Yes, Mom and Dad went off with their friends. I think they went to California or something. So I was with Grandma like a week or 2 weeks. And Mom came back to get me, to take me home. And I remember vividly, I was about 5 years old. I did not want to go home. I started crying. I was really, because I didn't want to leave Grandma. And finally I had to go home. But I remember Grandma saying to Mom, Shirley, if you don't spend time with your daughter, she's not going to want to be with you. You have to give of yourself to be with her, or she won't, like I said, want to be with you.
Is there any moments that you had with your grandmother that also helped you, and especially in that early part of your life?
Well, she was always there. And then she moved to Lanark from Chadwick, Illinois, years later. So she was always there. I could go visit her if I wanted. And Mom and I and my sister and my little brothers at that time then would go there and get pictures taken. And we'd go visit Grandma and Grandpa and play cards. And when Vic and I were married living in Dixon, we'd go visit with my two children. And she was just always there and happy to be there. And I felt sad that after we moved out here, out east to Maryland and Virginia, I didn't get to see her as much. But when I went back to Illinois, I always spent some time with her. And she'd always send a birthday card. You always can sense outstanding grandparents send you a birthday card.
You learned more from your grandmother by her example, not so much by what she told you.
Totally. By example. Love speaks in ways that you don't have to say words.
Is there anything that you wanted to talk about?
As I was mentioning my career in the Army Band, I was fortunate. Well, even being in the Army Band, I was sort of in the right place at the right time to even hear about the audition. And I tell that to a lot of my students. Practice, because you never know what door may open to you. And by choosing to go with the Army Band Pershing Zone, my small group got a lot of opportunities to, I don't know if I want to say rub shoulders, but and actually not actually meet them, but we would perform with them, beside them, and we'd get our pictures taken with them. And with George Bush, H.W. Bush, the father, when he was vice president for 8 years to Ronald Reagan, he and his family lived at the Naval Observatory grounds in D.C. And so we would go there a lot and perform for his family and for his special receptions that he would have, maybe with the Supreme Court justices, with different political groups. But he liked our group because we were small. And so I have a lot of memories of them treating us so well at their home. And then when he was president for 4 years, we were at the White House more. In fact, one time my group was called to perform up in their private quarters for a special occasion. Sadly, I wasn't able to go to that one because they couldn't get hold of me because I was with Ronnie as a baby. I was caught on the Beltway in traffic. But it was a very small group, so there were just a lot of opportunities to meet interesting people. Jay Stearns and I did a lot of duos. We were more operatic voices, and we perform at the Duke Golf Classic in North Carolina, and did a show there and met Perry Como and a lot of stars. And then later on, the Army Chorale went on to Nashville and performed, and some of us got our pictures with Glenn Campbell, and then with some other different stars. It opened a whole world. I got to see how a lot of other people lived and how they acted that I thought I would probably never meet. Not in real close quarters, but in close quarters that we were close to each other and had our pictures taken, and we were at the same meetings that we would perform at. A lot of those experiences helped give me more self-confidence in my music and life, and helped me more easily share and help.
I don't know where to go with it. So the podcast is usually, I try to go more for like the introspection, kind of understanding how people are the way they are, and like the deeper meanings, the mindsets, I guess the emotional vulnerability a little bit, just trying to understand how people became who they are.
I think I see some of that in all my students. When I get new students, you get a whole new family perspective. The students act as how their parents treat them. You have a different chemistry with every family. Some students, and it's a different DNA. I have a family that takes piano lessons, and the two children are of a DNA perspective, so that it's hard to concentrate. And some teachers probably wouldn't teach this child because this child would not do what he's asked to do. But the child can't do because they don't have the ability. So they do some little crazy things. So my perspective is this is the child, and he's here on this earth with this experience, with this set of DNA. So let's help him get through. Let's help him feel good about himself. So you have to praise smaller things rather than larger things so that he enjoys coming to his lesson. So he has a positive experience rather than feeling scolded because he didn't practice, I usually think, well, maybe if I get a better song that the student will want to practice more. And I found that a lot of that is true. So I ask my students, are you happy with what you're playing? I have an experience with a certain student who has come. He's only been 8 years old, but he's been watching how to play piano on the internet. He sat down at my piano bench and he played one of the Beethoven, the Moonlight Sonata, that sonata, and the third movement. I was blown away how he could play this. And he was only 8 years old. It wasn't perfect, but it was incredible. But he came to me because he doesn't know how to read music. So we made a deal. I says, well, let's do 15 minutes of what I think you should be learning to read music, and then we'll do 15 minutes on things you'd like to learn or that you don't understand. And it's worked out great. So he loves coming because he knows that he can do what he wants to do, plus ways that I think things that he needs to do to learn to read music.
You go for more of encouragement rather than being a disciplinarian. Like more of like what works for you, not this is the only way it works.
That's what worked when I was a child. Because love says 1,000 words in many ways than spanking.
What would you define love as?
Pardon?
What would your definition of love be?
Thoughtfulness, kindness. I think kindness is a big K, isn't it? Kindness, being, trying to read the other person and respond to where the other person's at, within reason, of course. I have a student that came last night for a lesson, and he didn't practice at all during vacation. I hadn't seen him for 3 weeks. I says, we were going to have a recital pretty soon, and Spring Festival is 3 weeks after my recital. Today's June 15th. Recital's February 8th. You need to learn these.
January 15th.
Yeah, did I say July?
You said June.
Oh, bad.
It's halfway through the year. We're going to have a recital in February.
Anyway, there's 3 weeks before my recital, and then there's 3 more weeks for festival, and then you get judged, But at least you get experience doing my recital first, getting up in front of people and performing, and we'll make it a positive experience. I tell students, let's make it positive no matter what. If you fall off the bench, what do? We get back up on and say slippery bench, or whatever it takes to make one feel good about themselves for getting up and performing their piece, whether the piece was perfect or not perfect. So I think that helps children learn love. If they feel love, they're more likely to give love.
So it's more like kindness over indifference. Well, you said I had kindness over indifference. You had a different kindness over
meanness. Yeah, if it's the choice, you want to be kind first, right? And if the person that you're having this issue with or whatever, then you just have to pull back. Yeah. Do everything you can, then pull back and maybe give them some advice on how to help situation.
Yeah, so it's also partially being empathetic to who they are, to their needs, to their wants, and then seeing if you can help them with whatever it is. Being
empathetic and also being objective at the same time and seeing the issue, is this helping the issue or not?
Yeah. I like how you said objective, not subjective. Because it's not the things that you can do. What you can, I guess in a way, being objective on empathy is better than being subjective, because if you're subjective, you won't be able to find out what they really need in order to get the most out of what they're paying for. I know on the last one that we did, the testing back in September, one of the things that you said is that you don't like people who take from those who don't have.
Nobody does, do they?
I don't think so.
I can't think of anything as an example at the moment, but, I think of all these billionaires. Some of them are givers. Some of them just want to accumulate. So there's a big difference between those two, and they're both billionaires. But some help others. So in other words, if we benefit, we should share it.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of your happiness by giving to other people? Like when you're able to give to other people, that makes you internally happy?
Oh yeah, we're supposed to be that way, right? Yeah. If we give, we receive at the same time, right? And you feel good about yourself, and you help others. You revel in their happiness because they can get ahead finally. The people that we spend time with influences us one way or another. When I grew up, I was in the Protestant church, and we never drank. I think I drank maybe a little bit one time when I was on tour with Harry Simeon.
Whoa.
But it wasn't much.
I'm going to edit this out of the podcast.
Oh, okay.
We can't tell anyone that.
But then when I joined the Mormon church, of course, the Mormon church doesn't believe in drinking at all, and that's fine with me. So why go there? Why try to see if you like liquor or not? Because what if your body really loves it and you want to find out you're an alcoholic? Yeah, it could be in your DNA to have it. And it's habits, too. You have a habit of always having a drink at such and such time.
And it creates a behavior. The more you do the same thing, the more your brain just makes those pathways, and then now you can't stop because it's muscle memory.
Why go there? Why drink if you're not in the habit of drinking? It's just like heroin. Why try it?
Well, some people do it socially. Do it because other people are doing it. So they can get a part of that social circle and have that same sort of happiness that would be a little harder to get otherwise.
Where one person is doing it for a social reason, another starts for a social reason, but then starts drinking because, it tastes so good. I don't want to miss that drink.
Yeah, or gets rid of the worries that they're trying to overcome.
And that's why people who do drugs, they just, maybe they're depressed or something. I wonder if this would make me feel better. Heroin, cocaine, or whatever. All of a sudden, it gets to be a habit, and they're in a deep hole that is very difficult to get out of.
But in the end of the day, it's doing the hard things that will make life easier later on.
Right, especially if you got yourself in a deep hole. Getting out of that is a hard thing.
You got yourself into a deep hole. It's not like drinking is going to do anything about it. You just have to get out of the deep hole.
It's like smoking, right? I think my dad smoked a bit. And I remember I was about 9 or 10 years old, and he had a friend there, a male friend. It was in the living room during the daytime. And Dad just pulled out a cigarette, and I said, "Gee, Dad, could I try that?" And he was a little bit shocked that I said that. And he stopped and thought, "Well, yeah, you could try it. If you do, you got to take a deep breath." I did that, and I coughed myself to death, and I never tried it again.
And he probably did that intentionally.
Probably. I didn't know that. I believed him, And I thought, well, that's a stupid thing to do,
It's funny how even people who acknowledge their own problem will do things to prevent other people from having that same problem. So your dad smoked, but he knew he didn't want you to smoke, so he did something that he knows would make you scared, because fear, while overall is a bad thing, it is a really good teacher.
Yeah, he let me live the experience. Not the whole experience, but the first experience, which turned me off. Thank goodness.
I guess there's like 4 different ways. There's good people helping good people, good people teaching you good things, good people teaching you bad things, and then bad people teaching you good things, and then bad people teaching you bad things.
So you want to hang around more good people teaching you good things, because you might not be able to discern sometimes. That's why James Roderick, I was in his home several times because I would babysit his 3 children. Now one of those children is a big producer in New York City, small, and he was so little he'd run and hide. I remember this. But I always really observed how their family worked and how they treated each other, because I learned so much. And he was so kind to me. He would, give a little extra money here or there to help me, because I'd cut company all day. And then I'd come to the house, I didn't have anything to eat. So I remember eating a lot of cottage cheese and pineapple. Yeah, to get by. So those are good times, really. They were hard times, but they help you learn to appreciate other people's hard times. you remember, oh, I went through that. Let's make it a little easier for this person so that someday they'll want to make it easier for another person.
It's also, you don't want to help someone too much, or then now they're going to go back to you every single time they have a problem.
Yeah, you don't want them to be relying on you.
Their car is going, and you just have to give them a little more push, and then let them keep going their way, but not too much that you start driving the car for them.
Educate so that they can...
And that's what you do with teaching. You have your students, you talk to them, you help them process whatever they're doing, but you don't play the piano for them.
During a lesson, I try to change the perspective every once in a while, depending how the student is acting during the lesson. Let's say they're working on something that's really intricate, and you can tell they're getting wasted, So I'll say, well, let's play something without music. Let's do something by rote. So I'll teach them a duet part, and we'll do a duet part. So we would I would change the perspective in the lesson. So instead of drilling down on what is wasting him a little bit, he or she, I would say, well, let's do something by rote. So I'd teach him a duet, and then I'd play the bottom part. Or I'd teach him how to play Peter, Peter, Pumpkin, Eater Hat, all on the black keys. And then that lets their brain rest a while, lets them look at things in a different perspective, and then we'll go back to it a little bit, just a little bit, and just keep touching in different parts and able to do the goal.
Make sure that your students don't burn out when they're going through the things, that there's a level of learning, and then there's a little break, but not a...
You don't want to be too stressful.
Yeah. So it's not like you don't want them to have a complete break. You just want them to have a decrease in whatever they're working on, and then go back to...
It's just like eating a diet. You want to have different foods. It gives you the healthiest diet, doesn't it? The healthiest body by having different foods. So even in music, doing different things during a piano lesson, but also playing a different instrument. But I tell the students the piano's the mother of all, because if you play piano, then all the other instruments will be a little bit easier.
What's the main thing you try to do whenever you're teaching?
I like to find out what makes the student tick. I'd like to find out what they like to do. And like, I use the Faber, 2 black ants, the fingers, make it a lot of fun. And as long as they're having fun, we're going forward. Now, if I get to a certain pace, level where it's really hard, then I'll try to find something in a different book at the same level, a little bit easier, so they can continue at that same level, then get over the hump.
So having fun, like making the learning fun, just makes it easier to retain the information. Because if it's something that's stressful, then you don't want it, like your brain's just actively like,
so never wants to come back for piano lessons. They associate the emotion with the activity.
So is there a good balance between having fun, but also still actively learning and retaining?
Oh, if it's too much fun, it's only for a little bit, and then we get right back on track, which lets them know it's okay to have fun. Now we need to get back on what we're need to be doing, just like in life. You go out and have some fun and do some things where you're not working and teaching or whatever, and then come back and get back on what you really love doing. Hopefully you love doing what's on track as much as having fun. Because I do. I really love teaching.
I still have no idea. Like, my brain is going, but it's just not going anywhere.
Why?
I don't know.
Because it's about music, maybe. Something different
I guess
than you're used to talking about.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's partially I don't really understand it too much, and then I don't know.
What, you mean the interview thing?
The just what we're talking about. Like, I don't know how to make the connection to be able to continue the conversation.
So the goal of the interview is
just to get to know you, to understand your mindset, understand how you got to where you got to. Like the experiences, both the good stuff and the bad stuff, to become the person you are today. Like why you chose to go on this path of your life rather than some other path. And like understanding how you tick.
I think we're all an experience here in life. We learn every day one direction or another.
Yeah. Yeah.
My music has kept me this way. But other things in life, if I hadn't had my music, I think I wouldn't be in as good of a place. I think we all need to find what we're good at. because I was certain things I was not good at. And a lot of it might have been that the teachers weren't expecting as much from, especially the men teachers, from girls. Like they didn't even sign girls up for advanced math in junior high. Although I don't think I had the talent anyway. I think they were right with me by not putting me in advanced math. Although mathematics and music usually
are very similar. It's like frequencies, stuff like that. Yeah.
Usually if you're strong on math, you're strong on music.
Yeah.
For the math I understand, I'm strong.
Yeah.
But a lot of in geometry. I got a D in geometry. I just didn't understand it.
Yeah.
I got a D in Spanish because I don't think my teacher knew how to relate. But I remember going to her at a moment and saying, I don't really understand Spanish. And she didn't know how to handle it. She said, well, you just hang in there. You'll get it. That was her cop out. You'll get it. You'll get it.
And you didn't like that?
Well, it wasn't very helpful. It was not helpful to me, although it made me feel a little bit better.
Well, what would your, like, if you were the Spanish teacher, what would you say?
I would probably want to spend some remedial private time with me.
Yeah. To really focus on.
But I don't think she probably wanted to do that.
Yeah.
The education system doesn't pay for that, you know. And she'd been teaching many years. She wasn't real young. So I empathize with where she was at. I understand. And you don't really learn Spanish unless you really get to the country. Now, Vic's dad, was raised in the Mormon colonies down there, so they use Spanish people all the time. I think I told you that he was down there, and then Pancho Villa started taking over the farms. And when so they escaped up to New Mexico, to Texas. That's how he's the only one out of 10 children that was born in the United States. That's why he was drafted in World War II. But then they went back got their farms when Pancho Villa was killed. They took care of Pancho Villa. Yeah, he's I'm sure he had some good aspects. Maybe he was like a Robin Hood. Who knows? It was Robin Hood that stole and gave to the poor, right? Yeah, in England.
I think there's one theory or something that Robin Hood, if he had done that, wasn't actually a good thing. Because, like economics and everything, if you steal from the rich to give to the poor, there's a reason why people are poor and reason why people are rich. And I don't mean like dirty rich, like they do it through corruption.
It really,
it's like
did the opposite than
I mean,
what he wanted to do.
It's kind of like government programs that government programs start as like a good thing. That's to help people out, to support them in whatever they're going through. But then it gets to the point where people start depending on that.
Yes, like welfare.
It's people who have good intentions but bad implementations.
Right, bad implementations because they don't have a plan how to make things work.
I'm trying to think of it from the psychological perspective. There's people out there who want to help other people, that want to help them understand, try to like get them back on their feet, because I mean, there's a lot of good people coming from other parts of the world. But I was just thinking, people. So if you take California, for example, giving money to the immigrants coming in, it's good intentions that you're trying to help someone, but it's good intentions, but it's bad implementation because you're helping someone who can't help themselves.
Especially if the someone you're helping has not been raised responsibly to have any responsibilities, especially criminals. So that's why we don't want criminals coming in, because they're very difficult to reprogram. You have to reprogram their brains and experiences. Now, it doesn't say that everybody can't be reprogrammed. I mean, all criminals are, because some were raised in such a negative situation, that was their only way.
And in some cases, something like that, you can't reprogram them. You can't help them out because it's just something.
Every once in a while, you'll find out that there's a criminal who finally saw different ways, different perspectives, and they turn around and they're ferocious in their ways of undoing the bad that they did.
There's always that one little thing that's always holding them back, because it's something you can't just forget about.
There's so many different perspectives and ways to see a movement or a choice or a rule. Rules are made for different reasons, and sometimes those reasons come out to be completely different than what they had been intended.
No one wants someone else's problems. People want to solve problems. They don't want it to be their problem.
That's right. The sad thing is if everybody took on their neighbors' problems, the whole world would be happier because we're all neighbors to one another, countries, streets, whatever. Just I'm really still friendly with the people across the street that Dobie ran into their house, and I'm kind to them, but I'm careful.
But it's also the other perspective that if you start helping someone with their problems, you become a slave to their problems.
Because they don't change. So you have to think of the best way to help them is to get them out of their problems.
Yeah, assuming that they want to get out of their problems.
That's right. They got to want to change their behavior.
Yeah. And some people they have seen the problem so many times and other people have helped them so many times that it doesn't, to them it's not a problem anymore. It's
not their responsibility anymore.
Yeah, even though it's theirs.
My first band director at Illinois, I only had her for a couple years, Clendenning, and she used to tour with the Phil Spitolny All-Ladies Orchestra in the 40s.
So what's that story?
Want to hear it?
Sure. Might as well.
Okay. So when I was about 7th grade, I wanted to play a band instrument. And Dad, of course, said, well, if you can find an instrument we don't have to buy, you can play anything you want. So I told the band director I would really like to play a band instrument. And she said that they had a French horn available. I didn't know what a French horn was, but I certainly learned. She gave me the French horn, and she worked for the Lanark School Department, Carroll County. Anyway, took the horn home, and then she gave me my first lessons back at school. I would get out of class for about 20 minutes once a week, and she would teach me how to play the horn. And when I blew in my first tone quality, she says, that is the most beautiful sound I've ever heard about a French horn. Now, whether it's true or not, I think it was pretty good, but she wouldn't have said that. But Phyllis Clendenning was a very unique person. She had toured with the Phil Spitolny Orchestra starting at age 16. And it was an all-ladies orchestra, I think I mentioned. And she played trumpet, and she was excellent. And this was back in the 1940s. In the early 50s, they had an opportunity to be on a TV show, but so did Fred Waring and the Pennsylvanians. Phil Spitolny was getting older, and he knew that if he did the program with the all-ladies orchestra, that he would be needing to buy costumes for these ladies. It would be quite involved, and he was getting older, so he decided to retire instead. So here she is in her early 20s, had been touring with them, and was a fantastic trumpet player. So she got in her mind that she wanted to play in the Chicago Symphony. So she was an excellent player, and she got an audition, and she went and she played for the high honchos, the leaders of the Chicago Symphony, and they were totally impressed with her performance. And they says, well, what would you like us to do? And she says, well, hire me, of course. I would love to play in this Chicago Symphony. And they says, I'm awfully sorry, but we don't hire women. So she lost her opportunity to do that. So she went and she finished her degree in Iowa at a university and got a teaching degree. And she came back and she taught in Lanark, Illinois, was her first teaching job. Then while she was there, she knew she wanted to do higher things than be stuck on little Podunk Hill, Lanark. She never said that, of course. But she got a fellowship at Northwestern to study there and get her master's, and she did. And when she did that, she got hired in one of those very high schools in Chicago. So she stayed there for the rest of her career. But along that time, I always studied and remembered her influence. And I remember having a lesson, 7th grade, and I remember I didn't know that I probably had ADHD because I would not concentrate. And I would say different things, about different things that we weren't talking about. And she finally, I remember her saying, Kay, you need to think about what you're doing while you're doing it. And that stood with me the rest of my life, that phrase, because she very lovingly said, Kay, you need to think about what you're doing while you're doing that. And so I went and visited her a couple times in Chicago. When I lived in Maryland, when I'd go home, I'd rent a car, and rather than driving straight to the farm in Lanark, I'd stop off and see her. She eventually had a dog, and she died of cancer years later. But she was a wonderful woman, and it's someone that I was very glad I got to know because of her professional experience. And I remember she saying when I visited her one time, wished that she'd always been a medical doctor instead of a musician, because it probably had a lot more opportunities to do more things.
Is there anything that you would have told yourself 20 years ago? Like if you were able to talk to yourself from 20 years in the past, what would you say to yourself?
With before I have had the experience of the last 20 years, I think I would have been in the same place. Because Ralph had passed away in 2012. We'd been married 25 years. And he sadly had congestive heart disease. So he couldn't do very much for many of those 25 years. So I took care of him. And I really wanted to have another life. And that's why I went on Match.com and met Ron Goodbread. Now, maybe I seemed like an angel to him. I think he needed me more than I needed. I don't know. I needed him for different reasons. He needed me for different reasons. So it was a good match in the same way that Ralph and I were a good match. So we helped each other. But I think I would have done the same thing with what I know now about what I was like then.
What about 40 years ago, 60 years ago?
I don't think with what I knew 60 years ago,
what would you like?
I wouldn't have married Vic Bowman at the beginning because I didn't really feel I wanted to, but I was put in a situation where my parents, you're 21, aren't you married? I got pushed into it. His parents were wonderful, especially his father was a wonderful, wonderful man and was a great influence to me in my music. But as I look back on it, it probably wasn't, well, it was fair because I decided to be a really wonderful wife, and I was. I just learned more things about him that I didn't know before that changed the trajectory of that decision to get divorced 16 years later. And most of it was because I didn't want to leave my two little boys so young. So that, if we could all look back years ahead, or years backwards, with the decisions that we made, the circumstances would have still been the same to make that decision. Now, if I would have been a stronger person, maybe I would have not married him, and I could have, there wasn't the money to be able to go off somewhere to do something. Dad would not sign for me to buy a car because you didn't sign for daughters. No, you signed for guys. So I knew to get ahead, I needed to do the best I could in my situation.
Is there anything that would have made you, are there any key components that would have made you stronger during that time when you were 21?
I think if I'd had more love at home, more support at home as a daughter, because then the two brothers that came later, they got everything. My first brother drowned. He was only 2.5. Then my next brother was 10 years younger. So it was like a different family, 10 years. And then I had another brother, 15 years younger. But I don't think Mom and Dad could have changed from what they were. They were doing the best they could with what they knew at that time. So it's how we react to our choices in life that really determines the other choices. And thank goodness, music got me through most of my life.
Even though you didn't have that same support when you were growing up, is there anything that helped you as the 60 years has gone by?
The fellowship and the encouragement of those like Dr. Robert Roderick. I mean, he was on my mind. Would he approve of this or would he not approve of this? Certain teachers influenced me more than friends because there wasn't enough time to have a lot of close friends. Mary Brady, my roommate that one summer, she was a wonderful friend. And she had her mom had a dress shop where she grew up. I remember borrowing her clothes because I didn't have any clothes for her. And she just freely let me borrow her clothes. I'll never forget that. And she was so kind. And all this kindness of the people that we associate with rubs off on us, teaches us to continue it if it's good, and continue if it's also not good. So it's very important who we associate ourselves with and spend our times with.
Is there anything you would want to tell your kids or tell your grandkids? Like if you were to just like general life advice that you wish that they don't have to make the same mistakes that you made.
Love yourself first in good ways, not in ways that you indulge yourself, but in ways that you can make wise decisions about yourself and your companion, your mate, your husband, wife, well, with them, with their wives.
It has a lot to do with trust.
It does.
Because people can use that trust to control other people in ways that doesn't help either party.
You see, you trust them, and you hopefully, since you trust them, hopefully they trust you, or they trust you first, and then you hopefully trust them back.
Well, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Not that I can think of. I'm sorry, I'm not one to roll on and on and on and on.
I'm not too concerned about getting the best people every single time. I just want to get people that I find interesting. Yeah. And then I'll, like, every single person I'll learn something new from. Like this, it might get like 10 views, 20 views. That's all I need. I don't need 1,000 views. Not yet. Not until I develop this more and more. And this is probably just go on the record as like, hey, this was a wonderful person to talk to. And yeah, so any last words that you want to?
It's been a pleasure. And I'm flattered that you wanted to interview me, Aaron.
Is there anything you want to say to posterity? Once you're gone, something that you want them to remember you by?
There's a lot of beauty in music, and sharing it, you can share love with music, but also get nice music. There's some music that can turn you off, that doesn't have the sweet spirit. You want to help a person feel good about performing music and singing music, and if they can't sing it or perform it, maybe they can dance to it.
I was kind of curious. Do you want to? I've never done this before. Do you want to try to recording you playing the piano?
Sure.
I'll see if I can get my microphone set up so that I can get something good sounding. If you want to do that.
Sure.
Okay. We'll see how that works out.